Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We're really excited to be diving into the topic of team dynamics today. My name is Samita Heslin. I'm the Associate Medical Director and Deputy CMIO at Stony Brook Emergency Medicine, and I'm looking forward to discussing team dynamics from the operations and informatics perspectives. Trevor?
So I'm Trevor Marshall. I'm the Medical Director in Chief of the Division of EMS at Stony Brook Medicine.
And I am Marshall Leonard. I'm one of the clinical assistant emergency department clinicians, as well as the head of sports injuries in the medical center in the emergency department.
Thank you. And we have a few questions prepared to start the discussion. The first question is, how does communication shape team dynamics in high-stress environments? Trevor, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, I can start with this one. So I think communication, especially when looking at the lens through both emergency medicine and EMS, takes on multiple roles in developing how the team works and how we interact with each other. When we look at the interaction from EMS, it's communication both at the beginning of a clinical encounter, shaping the interaction both between EMS and initial responders, family, and other providers, but then also in the transition to the emergency department and other care, that communication between the EMS and the ED and the varying providers of different skill sets, different backgrounds, really can, you know, guide that team dynamic and affect it in ways both that directly affect patient care and affect the ability of that team, which often keeps coming back together to work together and function at a high level.
My role as an emergency doctor, I'm also as well as trained as a sports medicine, primary sports medicine physician as well. And prior to my medical background, I was a professional soccer player. And so I see this question in kind of two different ways and perspectives. As a physician and a sports physician on the field, communication is very much needed alongside with the coaches and the players. As you can imagine, there's the patience of the sports clinician on the sidelines, as well as for the players, coaches, physicians. That triangle and athletic trainers have to be able to communicate, to be able to understand their injuries, to understand how to recover from their injuries, and also understand how to get through a complete season with decreasing the amount of injuries and sicknesses and diseases as well. So communication is very key as far as team dynamics.
Yeah, and I think from the operations perspective, communication really helps us understand where we can streamline our operational workflows, where are our bottlenecks, and how our current processes are working, and where are opportunities for improvement. I also think it's really important to hear from all members of our team, and that could include meeting as a group and hearing everyone's thoughts, but also getting the opportunity to meet everyone on a one-to-one basis and also giving people the opportunity to give anonymous feedback. Next, I thought we could discuss what are some strategies that you could use to build trust within a multidisciplinary team. Marshall, would you like to start this?
Definitely. So trust is very important, both in the medical field, but as well as on the sports field as well. In order to build trust, you have to be able to communicate at the very beginning. And then once the trust is understood between the players and the coaches, the sports physician as well, it's important to maintain that trust. For example, in the professional sporting world, there's a lot of injuries that may happen. And a lot of times within the locker room setting, those injuries are not really liked to be shared with other opposing teams, as well as to different opposing players. And as well as if the sports medicine physician is speaking to the player in general, and they have an idea of what may or may not be going on, they have to be able to trust that they can have a good communication between the two before they actually speak to the coaches and things like that as well. So it's very important to develop trust early on, to maintain it and to abide by it throughout a season and throughout your connection with players.
Yeah, I think when we talk about building trust at EMS, I think any of these teams, whether it's emergency medicine, EMS, to Marshall's point, a lot of those, thanks to sports medicine, all cross over and come back together. That trust component really is essential to that relationship, both as a medical director working with EMS, but also just clinically working with EMS and emergency medicine providers and the team in the emergency department. All of these teams are made up of a varying, as mentioned earlier, varying providers of varying different experiences, physicians, nurses, paramedics, EMTs, on our EMS side. And what's important to be open to have initial communication to build that trust, but also to really be present, both as the medical director and as a team member, where they know you're there, they know how to get out to you, they know how to reach you, and you can support them. It's really essential to know that on a fundamental level, you have their back, but also at the same time to give them feedback, give them areas where they can improve and not just be a person who's not really present, not there, not involved in what they do on a day-to-day basis. But yeah, so Samita.
Yeah, I agree with both of you. I really think it requires consistent communication with your team, building that mutual respect and that collaboration. And I personally think really being transparent, openly sharing information and decisions among team members really helps build that trust. I also think that helps everyone feel informed and that their thoughts are valued. And one of the things that I find super helpful is just active listening. I think that's a key strategy, understanding the unique perspectives and expertise of each team member. Everyone brings something to the table, whether that's clinical, administrative, or a technical background, just encouraging everyone to provide input and providing that space, safe space for everyone. I also think that recognizing and respecting everyone's contribution is really important too, because that creates that shared sense of purpose. I thought next we could talk a little bit about technology. So, how does technology impact team dynamics in your specialty? I can tell you from the operations and informatics perspective, it really enhances the way that we communicate, the way we coordinate tasks, and the efficiency that we can provide patient outcomes and care. And we've worked on things like streamlining the electronic medical records, utilizing things like clinical decision support to help with our patient care, as well as real-time alerts to share those critical patient informations and really reduce that risk of miscommunication. And it's not something we get right away. It's something that's an iterative process for us. And technology helps us communicate in real time. So whether that's between our ED team members, but also with our consultants and other specialties and other team members that are required for patient care. And I also think there's some negative parts of technology too, and sometimes it causes workflow disruptions and alert fatigue. So it's important to keep that in mind as well. And so, all in all, I think integrating technology effectively can really strengthen our collaboration, our situational awareness, and that can really help with enhancing our patient outcomes.
I agree with you, Samita. I think we see technology and it changes so rapidly. But within my short career, you could see the technology just getting faster and the ability to be able to communicate within different departments on a quick basis, and that's really improved the workflow within the emergency department where I'm working most of the time. Outside of the hospital as well, technology have begun to really increase as well with the communication that we can see within a team dynamics of the sporting fields, where they actually have developed technology where they track athletes on the field in real time, and that information is provided to the athletic trainers or the sports physician. That is analyzed and then given back to the coaches to see how much wear and tear they've been putting on their bodies over a period of a game, a period of a season. And that information has to be given back in a way that's understandable to the coach to see if a player needs to slow down, rest. And it's kind of a really controversial topic right now, because the old school is technology is not needed. We just need to play the game and enjoy it and be good. But to be honest with you, I think that technology actually has improved the wear and tear of athletes, and it's probably prolonged their careers for many years because of that. So it's going to be interesting to see how it continues, both on the medical side as well as the athletic side as well.
Yeah, I think to Samita's points on technology and communication, when we look at EMS, emergency medicine again, it depends really which team we're looking at. And I think there's multiple different teams in that environment. When we're looking at the patient care team, technology, for individual patient encounter, technology is clearly, streamline some of those processes. When we talk about communication between EMS and the ED team, moving forward, well, EMS can more seamlessly communicate without being, tied to radio or other devices as far as patient information and clinical information relevant to the patient's care. And that continues when we look at, the PCR and mechanisms which allow for that patient transfer and information transfer from EMS to the emergency department in the form of their PCR going directly into an electronic medical record, not necessarily requiring that ED care team to go searching around. And that can build a little more understanding of the ED team understanding what the EMS team is doing by having their record available, and actually by the hospital team as a whole, by being able to see that, understand what EMS is capable of and what was done pre-hospitally for the patient. On the same side, a lot of these mechanisms allow for data transfer back to the EMS agency. And I think that's really a game changer in some ways, where before, if an EMS agency wanted to, if a team of a paramedic wanted to know what happened to their provider, they'd have to call someone, follow up with the hospital, have some, and it take a lot of effort on their end to get that information. With some of these data solutions now, as far as communication goes, that chart becomes instantly available, and that diagnosis becomes instantly available to the EMS team, giving them not real time, but near real time feedback on what the patient's hospital course was, what diagnosis, what treatments did they receive in the hospital. And that really can, again, improve that dynamic between the ED team and the EMS team and the hospital team as a whole, and understanding what each component does for the patient. On another side, looking more at the medical director role, technology allows us to communicate, again, much more efficiently with different messaging platforms, through some EPCR vendors where you can directly provide communication to a provider on a certain PCR, a certain case through that platform without having, just through a messaging software that's kind of secured within that platform, allowing for back and forth communication on QI topics and feedback. In that sense, though, to Sumita's point, there are some potential downsides with that. When we look at, I can kind of a variation on alert fatigue, but if I were to send a message on every case and it was getting too nitpicky, too much of the, hey, you could have done this, hey, you could have done that, it can kind of cause a little bit of fatigue from that feedback without having any of those interpersonal, in-person, being present that we had talked about with building trust, where it's just messages going to people. So I think finding that balance between using the technology to help communicate, but still being there in person is essential to make sure that, especially that medical director provider dynamic, continues to be strong.
Thank you. I think those are all great points. The next question is a leadership question, and it asks, what role does leadership play in maintaining effective team dynamics in your field? And from my perspective of operations and informatics, I can tell you that I think leadership really sets the tone for communication, sets the tone for collaboration and accountability. I also think that it's important to create that safe space where team members feel that they can speak up, that they're empowered to do so, and they can share concerns, they can contribute their expertise. And I think leadership often has to mediate and be fair with the mediation, particularly with mediating conflicts and making sure everyone has this equitable distribution of tasks. So that I think is an important role that leadership also plays. And I think every project that we work on, every team that we work on, it's really important to create that culture of continuous learning. So we're always adapting to the new challenges, utilizing the new technology, and moving our projects forward. Marshall, what are your thoughts?
I can answer this in two different ways. Leadership plays a huge part into making a team run well and run efficiently. And there's a lot of different leaders that can be a part of a team. It doesn't always have to be one person leading the troops and telling exactly what's happening, but there's usually qualities of a leader that actually is able to delegate and understand that the whole group as a whole has a lot of different attributes that can kind of be efficient. So as a sports physician and being a leader of the group, the medical group that's within, like on the outside of the field, there may be athletic trainers, EMS providers, first responders, the coaches, security, and you're part of that leadership. And you sort of have to be able to understand where you play in that role and making sure that you have the confidence to sort of make decisions efficiently, but also understand that those decisions may be needed to be made by getting information from some of the other providers that are actually there as well. But on the second side, on the other side as well, as a professional athlete or in the professional like athletic world, leadership is key. And you always see every team has a captain or two, but those captains are the most efficient when they actually understand that the other players that are around them are giving them the same information that they can provide. I think in order to lead a team and to be efficient, a leader has to be able to listen and to be able to be understood, to be held accountable, but also be able to have the confidence to make decisions and kind of abide by those decisions that they make.
Yeah, I think, when we talk about leadership in EMS and again, to Smita's point, a lot of these other things, same things, right? As a leader of and especially through the role of a medical director, you need to support aspects of the team that's going to keep building team dynamics. So you need to support process where members of the team feel involved, where they feel like these educational processes, where they feel like these quality processes, where they feel like any sort of clinical review, any sort of discussion of clinical care is really there to help them grow as providers and not there to punish them, not there to be, hey, you haven't done this, therefore you're going to be in trouble. We have an important role in making sure that development, that process all stays towards how do we learn, how do we grow, how do we get better. And this is challenging because as a medical director, we're one role of a leadership team. We have to work closely with operational leadership. But depending on the structure of an EMS agency, depending on the structure of an EMS system, that medical director might have different relations with those operational leaders. And it might not be a direct reporting, not something like an emergency department leadership where we, directly have some more direct reporting relationship to the physicians, where we have to kind of bring in all aspects of that leadership team to make sure we're on the same page. And I think those relationships really can either maintain team dynamics, or if they kind of get out of control, if they go the wrong way, can really break down a team and make it a lot more challenging to have effective relationships between the team members.
Thank you. And our next question is, how do you manage team fatigue or burnout, especially in high demand environments? Marshall, would you like to start this question?
Sure. So working in a trauma one emergency department it can be a high stress environment. And we sort of make it a point, and it's kind of almost policy that we actually break down when we have codes and what went right, what went wrong. Let's discuss things after. But outside of the hospital, it's quite often you can see the employees and the families of the employees getting together and sort of having a little bit of fun and doing different activities outside. I think like in order to actually sustain a high stress environment over a long period of time, you have to have the ability to sort of separate yourself from that, whether or not it's outside of the hospital, doing things with your family or with other friends or with other employees and things like that. The main thing about a high stress environment, and I can try to parlay this on to the actual me as a professional athlete, because it's not life and death, but professional sports is a high stress environment. It usually deals with a lot of different games, championships, wins, losses. People lose their employment and jobs because they lose championships or won and lost, and just very small details. So you would imagine at the end of seasons that these teams that plays are very high stress. They're stressed out, they're burnt out at the end of seasons. But it's quite the opposite. You'll see practices and things that they do before games as very light. They'll play games, they'll play duck goose before like the final game, the day before a final game. And you think like that's kind of odd, but it's really a good coach or a good leader will sort of implement that for a sole purpose to basically lighten the load, knowing that when the game time happens, that everybody's focused now. So just like in the emergency department, you'll see us before shifts, we're a little bit light. But when things need to happen, I think that all providers in the clinical setting can be really focused on what we need to do and how we care for patients and how we speak to families in high stress environments, but then be able to sort of have light of the situation outside.
Again, all of that kind of plays in some levels to all of the fields we talked about. I think, in EMS, one of the challenges we have as an EMS medical director is that, again, as I mentioned previously, we might not be the ones who can directly control some of the factors affecting burnout. We might not be the ones who can say, okay, great, you want a better schedule, you want these different shift structures. We need to look at sleep hygiene and how we can make sure we're not working 24-hour shifts at one place and then another 24-hour shift at another place. And suddenly they've worked 48 hours straight. We might not be able to make definitive, this is not, but we can have the conversation with operational leadership and support practices, which allow for paramedics, for EMTs, for all the providers working with us to have better environments, to not be fatigued, not have burnout on some of those factors. But we do also have, again, as we talked about, what we talked about in leadership, that ability to make sure that the team members are heard. When they have concerns, especially on clinical issues, make sure we have an open door, make sure they can come with us, make sure they can talk to us, and we can kind of support those concerns, about those feelings, that have a path to talk about those issues and, really advocate for what the providers need.
And if I can just add one more thing, Samita, I think that's very important to be able to listen to the providers and understand their feelings on burnout and taking that very as a primary concern, and sleep and shift work and things like that can sort of play into the work life as well as like outside as well. So just being able to listen to and to try to understand and make decisions as much as possible is very important for all the providers.
Yeah, I agree with both of you. Incorporating wellness activities and debriefing like you had mentioned as well. And I think peer support, mentoring programs are also really important. And then additionally, employee recognition. Here at our hospital, we have star cards for employees, and that's a really awesome program. I also think it's important to leverage technology to streamline our workflows because sometimes we just have a lot of clicks and we can reduce those clicks and we can improve our notes and improve our orders and reduce many of our manual processes, and that can really help with wellness and burnout as well.
And I think it's important that we don't just accept that, oh, burnout is inevitable. I think both with EMS and emergency medicine, sometimes there's this expectation, oh, we're going to burn out, it's going to happen, it's going to be, it's the job. And I think working on ways to change that is also.
I agree. All right, so our next question is, can you describe a time when a breakdown in team dynamics affected patient care? How was the issue resolved? Marshall, would you like to start this question?
Sure. So quite often, for example, an injury may happen to an athlete, and the sports physician would be able to sort of diagnose the injury, and the athletic trainers are involved as well. And it's this analysis process on how do we get this athlete back to being able to play at that same baseline that they did prior before. At the same time, that player, that athlete, inevitably will want to get on the field as soon as possible, usually before the actual injury has actually sort of healed and they should be able to play. And the coaches, a lot of times, will want those players to be able to play as well. So you have this sort of dynamic between getting an athlete back, making sure that they're actually healthy enough to get back when you're having a lot of pressures on the outside as far as a player wanting to get back, the coaches wanting to get back. And so in order to actually collaborate together, it's very important to sort of be on the same page and to communicate. And if you don't do those things, every once in a while will happen where the player gets back prior to the actual injury being healed for whatever different sort of pressures that happen. And then you're doing a disservice to the player, to the athlete, to the patient, number one, but as well as to the team as a whole. So it's very important to communicate real honest opinions about the healing and the recovery of these athletes prior to them getting on the field, because if you don't, then something can possibly bad happen.
Yeah, I think the easy answer on the EMS side is, when we look at multiple teams, what's the most obvious multiple teams we have? It's the handoff from either the initial patient care, if there's some first responder team, if there's some other component of initial patient care, to the transporting EMS team, to the ED team. And those multiple levels of handoff clearly have been places where there's been communication breakdown in the past, where if you don't take the time to listen, where you don't take the time to have functioning relationship between those teams, you can really lose important information and important topics of patient care. Whether that be an issue where it's just communication based, taking the time out at patient transfer to listen to the transferring team, hear what they've done for the patient, and hear what their assessments are, to more leadership driven processes, or processes where maybe one team is afraid to say something that happened, or afraid to say, hey, we messed something up, we did something wrong, and this is what it was. So the next team knows what to do to take care of the patient, but they're afraid of backlash to that or something else. So I think creating an environment that really focuses on, good patient care and taking the time to listen to each team and kind of respect what they can do and what they can provide, in the patient care environment, really can help to mitigate some of these concerns and challenges and breakdowns that have clearly happened in EMS. And I think everyone who's worked either in EMS or emergency departments can think of times when that handoff issue has really been a challenge.
Thank you. And our next question is about collaboration. So, how do you foster collaboration between different levels of expertise within a team? I think this is a really great question because I think it goes back to that idea of open communication and developing that mutual respect and understanding and valuing everything that each individual begins and brings, because I think that's regardless of their role or their experience level. And additionally, I think it's important to promote that culture of mentorship and making sure that everyone feels included in those discussions, whatever topic is being discussed regarding, the projects at hand. And then I think debriefs also incorporate into this too, making sure you have regular team debriefs and where things need to be improved and having those discussions and feedback sessions. And then finally, I think it's important to acknowledge everyone's contributions to the team. And I think that really fosters the confidence and it strengthens team spirit and collaborative spirit across all of the different experience levels on the team. Trevor?
Yeah, so I agree, and I think that is really relevant. Whether again you're talking about informatics issues, emergency department issues, EMS, sports medicine, take your pick. All of these fields have different levels, expertise, whether it's coming from clinical expertise, operational expertise. And it's really important that all of these team members really can have their voice heard. And it's not just, you look at, let's say, medicine EMS or protocol development, where it's not just, I am the physician, so we are doing it this way, but engage the members of the team. They all have input. This is what they do every day. There should be a conversation, a kind of collaborative exercise, whether it's with a physician paramedic team making some ALS protocols involving the EMT when you're talking about BLS protocols, what are expertise in doing this every day and taking care of the patient, or operational leadership issues, getting all of the members of the team in the same room to talk about what we should be doing, how we should be managing operation issues, patient care issues, or anything else. And if you don't engage them, it's a really easy way to change the dynamic from one where it's collaborative, where everyone feels like they have skin in the game, where they're part of this process and they can own it, to one where it's just like, why am I going to do this? It's just what they're telling us to do. And so I think it's really, again, one of these things that's essential as we have common trends through all of these questions, that breakdowns, and some of them really can be cause breakdowns, and other ones which kind of just cause the team dynamic to unravel.
Yeah, and just to kind of piggyback off of those, it's just the main thing I think is, like you said, Samita and Trevor, just fostering the culture to be able to have everybody's voice heard at every different expertise level, because you may not understand or know what somebody may bring to the table. And it may not be just their formal training. It may be something that they actually have, just a life experience that they have that nobody else actually has or shares. But you will never know that unless they feel comfortable, unless they feel confident. And sometimes breaking a big group into a smaller group, or even one-on-ones, or even casual conversations on the side, may be able to foster that sort of dynamics and that team culture to be able to bring into a larger setting.
Thank you. All right. And our final question is, what advice would you give a team leader about maintaining strong team dynamics? Trevor, would you like to start this question?
Yeah, so I think, a lot of what we talked about, and a lot of what we talked about comes back into that question, but take the time to be aware of who's on your team. How do you work with them? How do you engage them? How do you make sure they feel included in the team? Recognize both, what exists already. So for EMS, understand, as a medical director, understand what your team is and how you can work with your team. Understand if your team is, are you part of the day-to-day operational structure, or is there kind of an independent structure where you have to integrate with them, but you're kind of in parallel structures, which is definitely more common. And understand how providers and leadership and everyone else works together now, so you can understand how to both reinforce existing strong team dynamics, but also build on places where there might be challenges. And where can, you as the EMS physician or as the medical director really exert your influence to make positive changes? Because sometimes it's not as straightforward as saying, oh, hey, I want this, so this is just going to happen. Sometimes it's kind of pushing on some levels or encouraging people to make movements in directions and make changes in what they do that improves the team dynamic as a whole.
I think it's very important for a leader or somebody in a new leadership role to first of all, just sort of understand themselves, right? So just have a clear understanding of who they actually are and what type of qualities they bring, because every leader is different, right? You can be a very vocal leader. You see this in the hospital, but as well as on the sporting fields, there can be a very vocal leader that says a lot with their voice, and that's how they show their leadership. However, I think the more important leadership is somebody that does it with character, does it with their examples, how they just lead lead by example, let's say, realizing what kind of qualities that you have, but then also being able to sort of even read more or talk to other mentors or leaders and build on your own leadership skills. So if you're very vocal in nature, maybe you can build on your leadership skills as far as listening or actually leading by example. And it goes the other way as well. So, you always want to sort of grow and build on a leader as well, but just first sort of understand what qualities that you bring, because for whatever reason you are in that leadership role for a reason you may not even know. Maybe even ask somebody that you trust very much, ask what do they see in you that you can sort of bring out even more.
Yeah, I agree with both of you. I think the common threads are clear communication, leading by example, creating that supportive and inclusive and cohesive team that's really built on trust and respect. And, I think it's really amazing to be part of teams and to be part of projects and initiatives. And that whole journey of being part of the team is so exciting and important.
And I think taking time to understand the team and the multiple teams. I think we have been this through people who have one team over here, one team over here, but also interlining teams, which all kind of interlock with each other. And sometimes it's not just maintaining the team dynamics of the team that you're the obvious team leader of, but also the secondary ones that kind of interact with that and knowing what you're dealing with. And again, taking that time to listen and understand.
All righty. That wraps up our final question. Thank you for your time today. And we are happy to take any questions that you may have.